Welcome back to the Casual GM podcast. I am your host, Drew, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Mike. Mike, how are you?
Fantastic, Drew. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. It's the off season, so I'm still allowing there not to be a ton of draft stuff, which is my bread and butter. Weigh me down. I'm kind of enjoying not paying attention to it right now. But we do have some stuff that we can pay attention to. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight.
Right on.
How about you?
I'm doing good. There's not a lot going on. My son's getting ready for graduation on Thursday and then a grad party. So a lot of chaos around the house, a lot of yard work and whatnot. But other than that, I think I saw 100 days until NFL kickoff.
Boy, it comes up fast, doesn't it?
Well, when 100 days is coming up fast, it's kind of weird. But yes, it's coming up fast.
Yeah, right. 3 months, and then we'll be talking about game stuff.
You're right on.
Hatter's House 710 and Mark are in the
Hatters?
chat.
Mark,
Hatters
Funky. Funky says, I'll try and make it back for the show. If not, I'll listen to it tomorrow. Awesome. Thank you.
He's pretty good about watching it after the fact. He's left a number of comments in our episodes, and I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, we got a good crew that join in, so that's awesome. But he does have a question, and do you want to get to it now, or do we want to?
Yeah, that'll segue real nicely into some other stuff.
Perfect. So Funky says, with June 1st right around the corner, what defensive tackles do you have as cut candidates? Other positions too.
Okay, so when I hear the first thing that I think of when I think of a June 1st cut is a team that's going to try and cut a player for the maximum amount of like salary cap relief that they can get their hands on. For end of sentence. So when it comes to June 1st releases and like who could be on the June 1st release block, I haven't heard of many possible candidates. And like, even if there were, which there will be, right? There will be June 1st cuts. I don't think that the Lions, even though they have salary cap space, are in the market for much when it comes to other positions or like needs on the team, that kind of thing. What is their current roster sitting at? 1 second. I'm in over the cap right now. Let me see what our roster looks like. We are at 91 total players currently as of today. So we're right near that max. And remember, they're going to get to go the whole preseason this year and then cut it right down to 53 in one cut. So I don't know how much I think that they are looking to add another player to that mix right off the bat. And I don't know that they've really, I know it might sound weird, but like, I don't think that they've really looked at like adding veterans. Like Calais Campbell was somebody that I thought they might have looked at when Baltimore let him go, but they didn't seem, he might have had a visit, but like they didn't seem that interested in signing him. So, and then I think it was Jacksonville or Carolina, one of them snapped him up. But I think the Lions are probably going to be good going into the preseason with this group. Of course it could change, but I just don't know where that would happen. So I don't have anybody pegged in. The guy that I think they should sign is DeAndre Hopkins.
Perfect segue, because we didn't talk about this at all before the show, and I figured we'd slide into the news and notes around the NFL. And last week, we talked about the gambling thing, and there's at least one I guess, unessential or I forget what
Non-critical, something.
non-critical player from last year that's being investigated still. They didn't release the name. We talked about that last week. But one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, Drew, and feel free for everybody in the comments to, hey, Johnny Sins, the idea of, all right, we've got this cap space, right?
Mike, do you know who Johnny Sins is?
No idea.
He is a male pornographic actor.
Well,
I would not be surprised if this was David Montgomery from our previous show coming back
gotcha.
with another alter ego.
So here I am welcoming Johnny Sins to the cast, and at least I didn't go, "Hey, Johnny!"
Yeah. Oh, dude, I should get your autograph, something like that.
Right? Yeah. But anyway,
hilarious.
But what is the point of having cap space if not to capitalize when opportunities arise? Right. So what is the most striking opportunity right now, and should we take advantage of it?
So I feel the Lions would be best served by signing DeAndre Hopkins. So I think the number one reason to not to would be that he is quote unquote a locker room problem. Well, let's examine that real quick. In Houston, he was considered to be a locker room problem because Bill O'Brien, I believe, who was now the OC of the Patriots, did not like the fact that he had kids with multiple women. And that is what facilitated the most lopsided trade since the Ricky Williams trade, in my opinion, to the Arizona Cardinals, is because they had a difference of opinion about how one should live one's life. Okay, fine. To me, that's not a good enough reason to get rid of a talent like DeAndre Hopkins. I think that you just make your peace with the fact that that's his private life or whatever.
Right.
I didn't watch Hard Knocks Arizona. I don't know what, if any, issues there have been in Arizona. So, the only thing I've heard was that he didn't play the last 2 games of last season, even though he was healthy, because Arizona was horrible. And to be honest, I don't know that I really hold that much against him for that, because you want to go out there and play on a bad team without Kyler Murray. I mean, with nothing to play for in the last 2 games. I mean,
that wouldn't be on the top of my list.
Correct. So now, as a Detroit fan, I would not want some guy that's I'm healthy, but there's nothing to play for, so I'm just not going to play. That probably wouldn't go over great in the locker room. But I maintain that if Detroit has a culture as impressive as everyone seems to believe that they have in that locker room, and you can't use that culture to take someone maybe like a DeAndre Hopkins or like a Jalen Carter and use that to improve that player, I don't know how valuable it really is. Right? Because otherwise you just collected a bunch of guys in the room that would have gone out and done and worked as hard and played as hard and put the effort in on any team they were in, regardless of what the culture was. So it just so happens that Detroit values those guys and has put them all into the same building. But this comes down to me for the talent versus everything else category. And DeAndre Hopkins is a talented wide receiver. He plays the position at the slot, the X wide receiver, the Y wide, whichever one it is, that across from when Jameson Williams is back, there would be across from Jameson Williams. And it gives the Lions a different skill set than the players they currently have right now. I think if you're all in on making the playoffs this year, winning the division, breaking the curse or whatever the situation might be, it's good for Jared Goff to give him somebody like DeAndre Hopkins.
Totally agree. And go ahead.
Oh, and we don't have Jameson Williams for the first 6 games of the season.
Yeah, and when you look at obviously Amon-Ra St. Brown is a star, right? The guy's a stud. Jameson Williams, we don't really know. He had 1 catch last year. It was a touchdown catch, but he had 1 catch.
Right.
So we think we have a potential star there, but until he actually can get on the field, which won't be until week 7, we don't know. So we've got Amon-Ra and we've got J-Mo for 2/3 of the year, but we still don't know what we have there. We have Marvin Jones Jr., again, toward the twilight of his career. And we have Khalif Raymond and Tom Kennedy. Like,
don't forget Josh Reynolds and the chemistry.
Josh Reynolds, that's right. I forgot. There's a lot of mediocre wide receivers that we have. I think if we were to get a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, even though he is also on the back third of his career, he is still playing at a high level. And I would much rather have a starting lineup crew that says Amon-Ra St. Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, and Jameson Williams than J-Mo, Amon-Ra, and any of the other guys we listed. Khalif Raymond, Josh Reynolds, whatever, right? It's just our baseline just jumped quite a bit by adding him. And we get him the entire year, unlike Jameson Williams, right? So we've got to have somebody, like our starters right now are essentially going to be Josh Reynolds, Khalif Raymond, and Amon-Ra St. Brown for the first 6 weeks. That's not scaring anybody.
I would think not. So
yeah.
Okay, so to me, unfortunately, I'm not able to effectively answer Funky's question. I would, if the Lions have the third most cap space in the NFL currently, I would sign DeAndre Hopkins to a deal. I would get him into camp, get him learning the playbook. I would prep for the regular season, even if he doesn't play, like in the preseason or whatever. I mean, I doubt they'll play golf in the preseason. So to me, that sounds like a good idea. Like if you're gonna add somebody before the season opens, like that would be the player that I would target. So,
what's our cap space right now again?
Our cap space right now is we're fourth currently, $23.7 million. We have an available cap.
All right, what would you give Hopkins? What kind of a contract would you be looking at? Would you be looking at like a 1 year? This is we want to just do what we can this year deal. Would it be a 2-year deal? What would you be thinking if you were Brad Gnomes?
So I think that if I was Brad Gnomes, and what I would try and do is I would try and say, okay, D-Hop, like we want you in Detroit. What are you thinking? Like, so like on Twitter, he supposedly wants like a good deal. So what does that mean to him? Is it just money? Is there multiple years there? Like, is it all up front? Like, I don't know what it is. I don't know what that means. But like, I would say, I want to sign you to a 2-year deal. I'll sign you for what amounts to $16 million a year. We're going to front that. And then I'm going to build a couple of void years into the contract. And we're going to take some off the top for salary cap reasons, right? So I think that you could do that. And like, you could say, now he probably, I would bet he would only want a 1-year deal because he would probably get to re-enter free agency immediately at the end of the season.
Yep.
So that seems like a pretty good scenario as well. Like he'll be able to pick where he goes. He'll allow the market to determine his value, you know. And if I was Detroit, I'd try and sweeten the pot a little bit.
Essentially an unrestricted free agent right now, though, right?
Yeah, he got released, so he is an unrestricted free agent. Yep.
So essentially, he's already going to set whatever market. But I think the important thing is most of the teams already have their rosters mostly set. They don't have a ton of cap space. So if he signs a 1-year deal, a lot of those receivers that are in the last year of their deals, they're going to be going to market, and that'll open up roster spots for other teams. So I could see him doing a 1-year deal, knowing that there's not a ton of roster spots open, but at the end of the fiscal, people are going to fall off of rosters and restructures happen, all that kind of stuff. So it might make sense for a decent sized 1-year deal, or even, you know, I would love to see him, you know, for 2 years.
Sure. You know, the Panthers and the Colts are also right there with the Lions when it comes to like available cap space and like, you know, they
which
both
one's closer to winning now?
Right. Well,
come to the D.
He did say that he wanted to, like, he put out like the quarterbacks that he'd like to play with, and it's like the top 5 in the game, you know. And it's like, we need a good defense, you know. And I was like, well, I wonder how he's
It's
valuing
improved.
that, because like, the Lions had like ninth overall defense from week 8 on last year, and made improvements to the defense in the offseason.
Yeah.
So like I would anticipate that unit's better if unproven. And like he wants an opportunity to play for meaningful games at the end of the season, right? Playoffs, possibly Super Bowl, and like the Lions are in the NFC and they're penciled in as a division winner, and like there's the opportunity there. I mean,
Would you take
like
a
they played.
$500,000 less if you're going to go to a team that's being penciled in as a division winner?
I don't know.
Home playoff game?
At this point, I don't know that I would be leaving money on the table for a situation, but like,
so he's never won a Super Bowl, right?
no.
If his
Houston to
goal is just to
Arizona.
make money, right? Exactly. If his goal is just to make money, then yeah, he won't leave stuff on the table. But if his goal at this point in his career is there's only a few years left of me being what I am, I want to go to a team that could win a Super Bowl. You see people take less for that all the time. So I can see him doing that.
I think that if he was going to leave money on the table, it would be like to a team like Buffalo.
Buffalo, yeah.
Or I hear that Kansas City could be a landing spot for him. I just don't see it. Like all of their wide receivers share a body type, and it's not his. Like,
yeah,
it would be like if you line them all up for like the position group photo, it'd be like which one of these dudes doesn't belong, and it would be fucking obvious. So like, I just don't think
it'll look like a heartbeat.
Yeah, pretty much. Like I just don't think that Kansas City. Maybe they could prove me wrong. Like Kansas City's in the business of winning Super Bowls, right? So like, if it's like, oh well, if he's the oddball out here, like I don't know that they're going to really care.
Yeah.
But if it means that he's going to help them win, and you get to play with Patrick Mahomes. But like, if I was the Lions, I would be. So I saw something that says they've done their homework.
Done their homework. Yes. Yeah. So everybody has.
Yeah, and I was like, they're in the NFL then, huh?
Yeah, right.
So like, come on. But
at least they're remotely competent at their job, so we know that much. Right. They've done homework.
Yeah, I would sign him. That would be my okay. Let's go to the season free agent acquisition.
So today's topic of the week, we kind of did. Actually, one of our very first episodes that we did was talking about positional value, and because that's a lot of what team building is kind of based around. There's been. I mean, with the Lions draft of number 12 overall running back and number 18 overall linebacker, there was a lot of discussion on positional value and how we didn't draft positions of value and blah, 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 right? So, and I know there were a lot of people like, oh, but he's a great running back and he's a great linebacker. Positional value doesn't matter. This is kind of that episode we're going to talk about. All right, let's refresh what positional value is. Let's refresh what it isn't. Let's talk about how positional value is determined. Like, when can you ignore positional value? When shouldn't you? That's kind of what my thought is here. We'll just kind of go through this refresh of what positional value is and isn't, and we'll kind of take it away.
Hey, Joey.
What's up, Joey? What's up, buddy?
So
what makes up positional value?
So I would say positional value is determined by okay, God, Mark, right off the bat. I would say positional value is the difference between what you can acquire a player for through the draft and what the NFL is indicating a top player at that position is worth in free agency. So I need a defensive end that can get me 10 sacks a season. If that player makes it to the free agent market, teams are willing to pay X for him. If I go so you probably know who that player is and what they're capable of, right? If he's entering free agency. So the other side of that fence is if I go to the draft and select somebody that I think could be a 10 sack a year guy, I'm going to draft that player at a certain position, and his contract value is then set based upon wherever I select them. So if that's the case, what is the difference between what I would pay on the open market and what I would pay by using a draft pick with a set value at that price? The difference is the savings, the surplus value that you can use to, after acquiring the player through the draft, to go back out into the free agent market and sign other players that help your team. So to me, positional value is a process that helps you identify if every NFL team has a salary cap, if we all have the same number of draft picks, so to speak, how am I going to use my picks to be invested in monetarily more important positions so that I can take my free agency money and use that to upgrade my team in addition to that. And when you're right, it's magic. And you have an opportunity to play for Super Bowls. And when you're wrong, are you really that much worse? Because you have a guy that doesn't work out on a contract that's set, and then you don't have to do anything with him. You don't have to keep paying him $15 million a year or whatever.
Right.
You have the flexibility to move on at some point in the future. So to me, positional value is a component of roster evaluation and roster building that should not be ignored, but neither slavishly followed at the expense of other roster building techniques.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head at the very end. It's a roster building technique, right? And there are lots of ways to build a roster. There's a lot of things you have to care about. Positional value is one of those. So like, to me, when I think of positional value, like you hit the nail on the head, but I was more thinking on an abstract, like what makes up positional value. Ultimately, how do we know which positions are the most valuable? Two things. Number one, what is the importance to the team? What's the effect on the game? Right. The quarterback touches basically every single offensive snap. He is the guy that's handing it off. He's making the reads. He's making the audibles. He is, I don't think it's even arguable, the most important player in the sport.
Right.
And almost in any sport, like quarterbacks and goaltenders in hockey are like the two most valuable positions of basically any sport. Mm-hmm. Probably soccer too, but I don't watch it. I don't care.
Pitchers in baseball.
Pitchers in baseball. Yeah, I guess you could do that, but there's a billion of those. Each team has a dozen. You got one starter in football and one starter in hockey typically. So like in that regard, the thing that the player that's had, or the position that makes the most impact on the game. So your quarterback, the league is a passing league. So your wide receiver is one of those top positions of value. And then of course, to protect said quarterback, your tackles, right? Those are the three on the offense. On the defense, it's the same kind of thing. Let's go after the quarterback. So it's going to be your edge rusher. Let's stop the wide receiver. It's going to be your cornerback. And again, the interior defensive lineman that's also rushing the passer and also gumming up the gaps for run plays and everything else. It's all about pressuring the quarterback and stopping him from throwing the ball. So that's kind of where I see when I think of positions of value, I think of, all right, what's the effect that they've got on their team, on the game.
Yeah. And, this is also a fluid concept, right? So like, to me, positional value is determined by the NFL, all the teams in the NFL saying this is where we choose to invest our money, right?
Yep.
So that is open to, well, I don't want to say change again, but that's exactly what it is. So like, for example,
every new contract, right?
Right. Every new contract. So like one thing that I think that we're probably going to see maybe as early as next offseason is that defensive tackle is going to take the 5th overall spot away from cornerbacks when it comes to how the market is valuing those players at those positions. So
already there.
Are they?
Yep. So let me share my screen real quick, and then I'll zoom in.
Yes.
So excellent. One of the things that we did last year for 2022, and then I just updated it today. Dr. D, yes, Goff sucking in OTA. It's just May, thank God. But it did sound like he had a really rough couple
Really?
days. Yeah. And believe it or not, it's because he was overthrowing his wide receivers.
I
So,
do not believe it.
I mean, they are running half speed and no pads. So,
Right.
But one of the things that we did here, can you guys see that okay? Can you see that all right?
Let me check here. Yeah, all right.
All right.
Can
So
make it out.
what I did is I took the average annual value of the contracts for the top 10 most expensive players at each position. So Lamar Jackson, $52 million per year. Now, granted, this is not cap hit because there's a lot of things that go into that. And every year's cap hit's going to be different, but the average annual value doesn't change. Right. So Lamar Jackson's at 52. The 10th highest, actually tied for 9th, is Daniel Jones, Dak Prescott, and Matt Stafford. They're all three at 40 million.
Oh, I got you.
So
they're all tied for 9th.
They're all essentially tied for 9th, but
sure,
I'm listing 10, not 11. So
gotcha.
But so you're looking at your quarterbacks, and one of the things I did there is I took a look at what is the difference between number 1 and number 10, because a lot of times that goes to show you how important that one particular player is and where they're at. And there's actually a pretty big gap between the highest paid quarterback and the 10th highest paid. We won't even get into like 15, 20, 30th, because now you're looking at quarterbacks on rookie deals or just veterans that are bridging to the next cheap draft pick or whatever. The average quarterback in the top 10 makes $46.2 million, or approximately 21% of the team's cap hit. So when we look at how do we know which positions are quote unquote valuable or not? The market tells you, right? So the average in the top 10, I just did the average of the top 10. You can see 46.2 million for quarterbacks, 11.5 for running backs, 24 for wide receivers. So I'm going to scroll over to the right, and I sorted them by their average top 10 costs. So if you look at the top 6, you got quarterback, wide receiver, and tackle, left tackle in this case, on the offense, and then you've got edge, interior defensive line, and cornerback on the defense. Those are the top 6, and then the right tackles are inching up toward the left tackles because teams are realizing I don't have to put Joey Bosa on one side; I can put him on either side, and it's important that we stop him. So right tackle is kind of like the honorary 7th option there, and then it starts dropping. Like your off-ball linebackers, your tight ends, your guards are down toward the bottom.
So I should take this. Hang on one second. I should take note that the guard numbers are not updated.
The guard numbers are not updated. Did I not do that one?
So where's Quentin Nelson?
Right here.
Yeah, he's making 20 a year.
Oh, so I will say I went on Spot Track today.
Right. So
I will.
I think Spot
Track on that.
Also, Chris Lindstrom signed a 20 million plus year. So I think a lot of these numbers are right where they're supposed to be. These in particular have a couple I think needle movers that aren't out. So I think that guard will be a little bit higher, and I wanted to segue.
Oh shit, you're right.
into what Joey says here. He says interior offensive line won't be far behind defensive tackles. And so I wanted to talk about that because I think it's a good point, because as defensive tackles, as the market is determining that they are more valuable, what is the thing that is going to counteract that in roster building? Your interior offensive linemen, right? So when a team finds a Quentin Nelson, a Lindstrom, somebody like that, who's able to help effectively stop or minimize the impact of an Aaron Donald or a Chris Jones, those guys are going to become higher paid and more valuable. So we are going to see positional values change as the market dictates how the NFL feels about these things. So it's a good point, Joey. I'm glad you made it. Thank you.
Thank you
And
for
like,
pointing that out.
yeah,
I love it when people tell me I'm wrong
right.
because that gives me an opportunity to fix my mistake.
There it is. You know,
16.
look at the numbers that you're look. I mean, look at the difference. You know, Lacken Tomlinson, former Detroit Lion, I might add.
All right,
Still
so
in
those
the
are the
league.
updated ones. I don't know what I was looking at.
That's okay.
So
Not a problem. You know, but like, look, so if you look at the average just at guard now, right? If you look at the average salary of an interior offensive lineman, you've got 16 million bucks. It wasn't that long ago that is what wide receivers that entered the open market were getting paid on a year by year basis. You know, remember Kenny Galladay a couple of years ago, he left to go to the Giants. They gave him 16 a year. You know, so like we're talking about a top 10 offensive lineman being worth an absolute trash wide receiver that some team fucked up on. You know,
yeah.
Value. I don't like our defensive tackle situation either, Dr. Detroit. You and I share that.
So
that's why I was upset about Carter.
But
yeah, Michael,
so the
please
market,
continue. Yeah, the market.
The market ultimately determines what is considered a position of value because you pay for what you value, and you can clearly see, the top 6, and you thrown right tackle in there, top 7. Yeah, like Joey mentions, our guards are popping up there, and they're essentially at safety level. They're ahead of linebacker, tight end, running back, center. It's kind of the least on the offense there. But the other thing that I wanted to kind of mention, just since we're going over all of these, if you want to see who the others are, Aaron Donald is a freak of nature, and he's getting paid like it. $31.7 million, talking about resetting the market. But, and this is why does positional value matter? And again, we talked about this the last time we did this, but if you look at if you took the best, if you go by the concept of the best player makes the most money, and that's not always the case, but if you go with the highest paid, quote unquote, best player at each position, you're looking at $343.5 million for one starter at each position. That is not the other 40 guys on the roster or 35 guys on the roster, right? We have a cap of 224.80, 224,800,000. Even if you just took the 10th best at every single position, you're still looking at $203 million. You'll have $20 million to spend on the other 35 players if you get just the 10th best. Right. So positional value matters because you can't have the best at every single position. You have to be able to find the nooks and crannies where you're like, okay, I'm gonna pick this guy. I'm gonna use this guy, Aaron Donald. He's gonna be the linchpin of my defense. I'm gonna pay him a lot. On the other hand, you've got to pay other positions less. And who are those? Typically, your running back, your tight end, your kickers, off-ball linebackers.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so, like, I was quite critical initially of the Lions draft this season, especially the 2 picks in the first round, let's start with not because I don't like the players that they selected, but because I don't think they found the value positionally that they could have had otherwise, still also taking good players. So I think that the first 2 seasons of Detroit drafts underneath Brad Holmes exemplified good positional drafting. Now, you were sitting at what, 7-2 in those first 2 drafts. Easy to get good players, right? But like, if he had taken a running back at 7 instead of Penei Sewell, I think a lot of people would have been upset, right? If you had taken a linebacker at 2 last year, I think a lot of people would have been upset. I think the difference between me and those people is my list of where, like my ranking of where it's acceptable to take those positions is broader than, say, the average fan that might go to a game on Sunday. So, like, there's a discussion going on right now in the chat between Joey and Detroit about, like, we're pretty weak at defensive tackle. Yeah. And as the market has now borne out this season, defensive tackles are getting paid. So, like, the NFL as an organization is determining that that position is more important than otherwise would have been the last 5 years. If you went 5 years ago and saw what defensive tackles were getting paid on the open market, it's nothing compared to what they're getting now. So that NFL is evolving. Like, positional value will help you, A, determine how the NFL is evolving. B, how they are valuing those certain positions. C, where you can save money when you're trying to construct your team throughout the free agency period, the NFL draft, signing UDFAs, that kind of stuff. So, like, love Jahmyr Gibbs. Fantastic guy. I think Jack Campbell's going to be a real good player for the Lions, right? But because they're first round picks, they are, I think, going to get paid not crazy amounts of money for sure. Crazy amounts of money for their positions having not played in an NFL game. Yeah, then you can start to have that discussion. So the expectation then increases. You need to be good early. You need to be productive and consistent over your rookie contract. Not everybody does that. And when you miss, and it's inevitable that you will miss at some point, then you're losing. That's where you lose the value, right? So, like, a guy like Quentin Nelson, who went 6th, I want to say, in his draft year, like, the way that he gets graded out every year, he's effectively worth a left tackle on a team. So, like, the way that I always think about it when it comes to, like, say, drafting Quentin Nelson, or let's use Frank Ragnow for that example. Like, when the Indianapolis Colts line up with it, if they added another decent, slightly above average left tackle on their roster, their offensive line looks like left tackle, center, as far as, like, how well those guys play at those positions. So there's a lot that goes into it. I think that, like, the salary cap matters. That's one, I think, assumption that not everybody shares. And positional value allows you to better manage your cap because you have the surplus value that you can put back into building the roster. Where are we going
totally
next?
Agree.
Yeah.
So one of the things I was looking at while you were talking there, Jahmyr Gibbs,
offensive weapon.
Offensive weapon as a running back. His
Getting paid
average
like a
annual
running back.
salary is $4.46 million.
Right.
And what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to find the top salaries. So that puts him at the 13th highest paid running back in the NFL, regardless of how well he ends up being. That's kind of that the opportunity cost, that difference in value from what you're going to be paying him and then what his relative value in the NFL is, right?
So I'd like to point out. So I'm on Over the Cap's list. You know who the 15th highest paid running back is? The guy right behind him.
Bijan Robinson?
No, it's Jamal Williams. Former. So here's so I think that this is a good. I think that this is a good example of positional value, right? So, like, I'm not going to make the argument that Jahmyr Gibbs and Jamal Williams are the same player. I think that Jahmyr Gibbs is a better running back than Jamal Williams. Okay. But because of where you drafted him, as opposed to re-signing Jamal Williams, you are paying those guys the same. The market determined Jamal Williams' contract. The draft and the CBA determined Jahmyr Gibbs' contract. They play the same position. You're paying them the same amount of money. So if you had kept Jamal Williams and invested the 12th overall pick into any other position, you would still be, quote unquote, set at running back, and you would have another position, perhaps a defensive tackle, Khalija Cansey, or who was there another guy? The guy from Clemson, Brian. Oh, I can't even remember their names anymore. It's so terrible. Not Brian Burns, but like it is an interesting coincidence, right? So he plays for the Saints now, but like you could have had that guy,
yeah,
and now you would have arguably affected another position group on your team. What the Lions did was, if you want to look at it this way, which I think that you should, just as a good roster building technique. Breesy, thank you, Joey. Damn it, you're so awesome, Brian Breesy. So like, the Lions basically said, "Hey, we're going to invest $4 million in running back. Okay, we have that. We could have the guy that we had on the roster last year fill that role, but instead, we're going to let that guy walk, pay the same amount of money, but we're going to invest one of our first round picks in the position."
Yeah,
I don't think that's a great way to do business. Is Jamar? I mean, it ultimately comes down to how good Jamar Gibbs is, right?
yeah, and they're going to be used differently, right? Williams was a 3 yards in a cloud of dust kind of guy, whereas Gibbs is going to be more of a Deebo Samuel,
chess piece, right?
Javid Best type of thing, where you're catching the ball. Hopefully, he doesn't have the concussion issues and all that kind of stuff.
Man.
What's up, Steve-O? But that's the way he's going to be used. He's going to be used in that kind of like gadget. He's going to run. He's going to catch. He'll do both. Whereas Williams wasn't going to do that, but Montgomery can. That was one of the reasons why you got Montgomery.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, that's not that he's not going to be good. He's going to be great. Campbell's going to be a very good linebacker, but I'm not exactly sure. I don't know where you got the linebacker salaries, but he is going to be making $3.7 million a year for his annual, which puts him around 20th.
Yeah.
21st. Makes him 21st highest paid linebacker. Which it's better, but like, does that mean he's going to be better than does that mean he's going to be better than starters on at least a dozen other teams? He's not even going to be our starter.
So I will mention that Alex Anzalone also makes more than he does and plays the same position. So I mean, like, this was my other complaint during the draft, is that the Lions, by re-signing Alex Anzalone and having DeAndre Swift on the roster, did not have a need at these positions, yet they chose to invest picks to upgrade them anyways. Okay, fine. Okay, so that's the reality that we live in. But once again, now Jack Campbell needs to perform at a certain level pretty early in order to, quote unquote, be worth the money, right? Same thing with Jahmyr Gibbs. Whether or not he's an offensive weapon or a running back, he needs to have a really productive season immediately, because even though Jamal Williams is a 3 yards in a cloud of dust running back, he was our first 1,000-yard back in God knows how long, and exceptionally effective at running the ball. I could give a shit about the 1,000 yards in a season thing. Fucking don't care about it whatsoever. Here's what I care about. When you handed him the ball, he got you to second and mid.
Yeah. He got that first down that right. Because it was third and short or fourth and short.
It wasn't going to be second and 11, right?
Yep.
That matters. That matters to me, because then you're going to throw Amon-Ra St. Brown a 5-yard out route or whatever, and then you're looking at third and short. And I would much rather have a game full of lots of third and shorts than I would have a dynamic playmaker upgrading that position. So, like, we'll see how it goes, because I could be, we might look back at this in 8 months and I could be like, oh, Should have said that. That was a way off on that take. Yeah, so like Dr. Detroit says, he got almost 4 yards of carry. Like when I was coming up, if you got almost 4 yards of carry, you didn't need to do anything other than run the ball to win.
Yeah.
That's not the way the game works now, unfortunately, but like that's good.
Yeah.
Like you had something good, you paid the same amount for it to maybe get something better. That's not worth a first round pick to me.
So there's two more things. I know we're already about the 45-minute mark, but this is fun. I'm enjoying it.
It's great.
So I had two other notes. The first one was, let's kind of talk about where is positional value most often seen. You talked a little bit on the draft, right? There's essentially it's on the player acquisition and retention, right? So drafting and that kind of formula is essentially salary compared to value, the salary to value formula or comparison. That's what we've been talking about. Like automatically Jahmyr Gibbs is what I said was the 14th highest paid. Like he needs to be essentially one of the top backs in the NFL. Otherwise we're overpaying him, right? And Campbell needs to be one of the top 17 linebackers in the NFL or we're overpaying him. So there's that salary to value formula. But there's also free agency and trades. Free agency is really more of, I'll let you kind of talk about this because you're better at this one, but free agency is more of accessibility to value. Talk about what we mean by that.
Okay, so accessibility is probably the first hurdle that any team has when it comes to adding players to your roster, right? So it's like, look at all of the crazy shenanigans that the San Francisco 49ers a couple of years ago did to move up to the 3rd overall pick to pick a quarterback, right? They invested lots of draft capital in order to.
That's right. They jumped up to get Purdy, right?
That's right.
Because he's our starter now, right?
That's what happened. You're foreshadowing, Michael. So they spend all this draft capital to move up to 3. They select Trey Lance, right? So Trey Lance.
That's right.
It was Trey. Right. It was Trey. Trey Lance sits for a year behind Jimmy Garoppolo. They put him out there last season for the first couple of games. He breaks his ankle. Okay, he has to sit out the rest of the year. Luckily, San Francisco had also taken Brock Purdy as Mr. Irrelevant in the previous year's draft or that year's draft, and they had someone third string who ripped off 7 straight wins, got him into the NFC Championship game. Not a bad season, right? Yet they still have a need at quarterback. So are you telling me that like Brock Purdy is the guy? Because there are people in the media that think that like, oh, this is the next Tom Brady, right? Like their stories are similar. Late round picks, got an opportunity, start winning, if only ...
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, like math would tell us that like eventually that guy's going to show back up in the NFL again. This soon? Kind of crazy. But what do the Niners do to immediately address their quarterback situation if they wanted to say be completely rock solid at the position? Can they go out and draft a quarterback? No, because their first pick was at like 98th this year. Right? You're taking a shot on like someone falling down the draft like Sam Howell did last year. Okay, they can go out in free agency and get one. Well, let's examine who got to the free agent quarterbacks. Like top 15 quarterbacks in the NFL never make it to free agency. The closest that we've had in recent memory is Lamar Jackson this year, and he was under the non-exclusive franchise tag. And that's not being on the market. Like he's not unavailable, but he's not in a bidding war for his services. So they can't go into free agency and solve that problem. So that leaves them a trade. Okay, so now you have to find a player that their team would be worth moving off of. Once again, probably not a top 15 guy, unless he actively wants out of the situation and erase his Instagram feed. So if you find that guy and you make the trade, you are going to have to give up also a lot of draft capital and potentially take on a lot of salary onto your books in order to quote unquote not have that problem anymore. So the market shows us that there are positions that consistently make it to free agency. What positions are they? They're the least valuable positions in the game. Running back, Jamal Williams is the 15th highest paid running back in the NFL. He made it to the open market this year, right? So tight ends, also like a position that you can get on the free agency market. Interior offensive linemen consistently make it into the free agency market. Cornerbacks, shockingly, make it to the free agency market more.
They're one of the the weird exceptions to the rule on the whole like positions of value,
right?
To accessibility.
Yes, that what you could have said last year was cornerback was the most accessible position in the NFL on like the accessibility to importance and value metrics.
Yeah.
So you could go out into like the Lions just did it. Like they went out and signed Cameron Sutton in this offseason, right? Like for a relatively even deal, 11 million a year. Fine. That's not killing anybody.
Yeah.
By the chart that you just showed us, they're just over that $10 million a mark. You can only have a certain number of those guys. Teams are likely playing 3 cornerbacks. You can't dedicate between $30 and $50 million to those 3 starters. Where are you going to find them? Where you're going to get them in? You can get one in free agency.
Yeah, and your tight ends, dime a dozen in free agency. You can get Brock Wright, TJ Hawkinson, even quality tight ends almost anywhere.
Right.
Right.
So who can't you get? Justin Jefferson not making it to free agency. Quarterbacks of almost any value, you're not getting it to free agency. Left tackles, you can't find them. Right? So like there are places that you should invest free agent dollars into building your roster where free agency determines accessibility. That's where those positions should be invested in. And then the other positions that don't hit the market, you need to invest in those positions with your draft capital because there's no other place to find them.
Right. And those off-ball linebackers
are available.
Running backs are available. Why are we spending draft capital on something we can get anywhere?
Tremaine Edwards, TJ Edwards. The Bears signed 2 of them this season.
Yeah, and if we looked at that list of like when we sorted based on like the value, right? Quarterback. I'll just run down. I'm not going to share my screen, but I'll run down top to bottom. Quarterback. And you tell me accessible or inaccessible. All right.
Sure.
Quarterback.
They're all none of them are accessible.
Right. Wide receiver.
No.
Edge rusher.
No.
Left tackle.
No.
Interior defensive line.
No.
Cornerback.
Yes.
Yay, finally an exception to our rule.
Right.
Right tackle.
No. Well, McGlinchey made it to the market this year. I would say more than left tackle.
Yeah, more than left tackle, but still not super. You're still in a bidding war for those guys.
Correct. Right? Like he got $17.5 a year.
Yeah.
Right. Because the difference between right tackle and left tackle is getting kind of slim.
Yep.
Safeties are available.
Now we're getting, as it turns out, we're getting outside of those positions of value. Safety, guard.
Yes.
Off-ball linebacker.
Yes.
Tight end.
Yes.
Running back.
Yes.
Center.
Yes.
Kicker.
Yes.
Punter. Long snapper.
Right.
It's really weird how like the top ones are like you can't find them. And yeah, Joey, like wide receiver occasionally somewhat but Dr. Detroit, you have to overpay. It's a really tight market. Right. It's not that they don't ever come out. Like Devontae Adams, he was out, right? And he went to the Raiders.
That was a trade.
Occasionally get that. Oh, that was a trade though, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Never mind. He wasn't available.
Correct.
Although, so that's the other way, right? So you can draft people.
Right.
You can sign them in free agency. The other way to do it is trading. So, and as it's scrolling up across the screen right now, that the kind of formula for trading is salary is the value plus accessibility. Like Yeah, you can get a Devontae Adams, but you're gonna have to pay through the nose because he's not that. He's that position at that quality is not very accessible.
So here's exactly Christian Kirk. That's a good
Yep.
point, Joey. So here's why I think positional value is important as an important tool, right? If you look at like this little formula that Mike has put together here, you can do this entire formula and then still do every other roster building technique that you have in your toolbox or whatever that people say needs to happen to the exclusion of positional value. You can apply this, find where the value is, and still figure out what are your intangible guys, who's going to fit our roster, what's a good locker room mentality, who's got great game tape, who did interviews well, who's the most athletic. You can still do all of that stuff and include this. There's no reason to not include it.
Right. Well, Dr. Detroit says, hey, we picked up an entire backfield in the offseason, LOL. That's true, but like safeties are accessible. We already talked about that, right? We picked up a safety.
Yeah.
Cornerbacks are one of the we even mentioned that as kind of the exception to the rule on the whole like top positions of value is they're becoming they have been in the past more accessible. But we haven't picked up any of the others. Although we didn't really need we do need edge rushers, but you're not going to find them, right? Oh, gotcha, Dr. D. Yeah, just reinforcing.
He's being supportive, which is really awesome. So
but yeah, it's not impossible to get them, but
no,
you're in a market fight for them,
right? So like one of the reasons why I think that NFL media and the fans of the Detroit Lions are so happy about the offseason and the way that it went is because you were able to go out and get good players that everyone knew was good. Cam Sutton, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, right? Emmanuel Mosley, Marvin Jones. They recognize those names. Those players have performed well in the past, right? But you were able to get them on the free agent market. You did not have to break the bank for them. So you got good value. Excellent. That's where they should have invested their money.
Yeah.
So thumbs up.
And the other point is it's not. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Just the other side of the coin was you then had currency of a different kind in your draft capital. And that's where I think that you were exchanging on a lesser rate of value, right? Not that the players are bad, just that the value of those players was not as high. So when you had an opportunity to do so, in my opinion. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'll say that. And the other thing is, it's not that none of the players at those positions are accessible. It's that we're usually talking about the top end talent, right?
Right.
I mean, you can find Marvin Jones Jr. quality people left and right. Kenny Galladay, and he's better than Galladay, but he's still like, all right, mid at best, right? He's not an elite upper level talent, and you can say that about anything. You can get quarterbacks on the open market. You're just not going to get a high end one. Right. So it's not that none of those guys are available in those positions. It's just the ones that are the best just aren't.
Yeah. I mean, if you need a guy that's quality, like if you need like a Jacoby Brissett, an Andy Dalton, you can find that level of player in free agency. But if you need a guy like Lamar Jackson, you're not going to. So it's like, where does our team need to go to improve, right? So I still think that there are positions that are below where they should be on the Detroit Lions roster. Right guard, X wide receiver, defensive tackle. And like, they signed Marvin Jones. They drafted Broderick Martin. Maybe Vitae comes back. We saw something about him, potentially being able to get back by camp or what have you. So like, some good players. You had an opportunity to get better in those positions and you chose not to. So
The other thing that I told you I had one other kind of topic on positional value that I think is important is when can a team ignore positional value?
Sure.
Right. There are times that you can do that. I really kind of figured out there's two times. Either A, you need to be a top 6 team, right? Where you're a Super Bowl contender, you are super high end, you made it to the Super Bowl but lost, or you made it to the Super Bowl won, whatever it is, right? You are a high end, super talented team. Your floor, your baseline, I should say, for your players is significantly higher than everybody else's. At that point, you can go, all right, well, I can just take the quote unquote best player available. I don't have to care about the positional value because I've got good players. And then the other time is when you're just really stacked at a high impact, high value position. Kansas City Chiefs are not, if for whatever reason they were at 9 instead of Eagles, actually just as good, right? They were at the 9th draft pick. They very easily could have taken the best quarterback on the board. They've got Jalen Hurts. They are stacked at that position. They don't need another one.
They're
right?
fine. Yep.
So, granted, they did take another position of value in that Jalen Carter, but like, if it was the Chiefs, that'd be no different. They would not be taking a replacement for Patrick Mahomes.
Correct.
Right. So, if you are stacked at certain positions of value already, you can take the next level down, or you can pinhole things. And so the reason why I think that Detroit ended up taking Jahmyr Gibbs at 12 and Jack Campbell at 18 is they feel that they are in that top 6 Super Bowl contenders where our baseline is up high enough and they're just pinhole, poking, filling the little leaky boats. Like, all right, I'm poking that hole, I'm filling that hole. And these were the holes that they felt were the biggest, most important needs for them.
Sure.
I appreciate their enthusiasm and their positivity. I'm not sure our baseline is that high where we can ignore other positions that have more value, considering what we did in the offseason up to that point. Right. But that's the only thing that I can think of as to why they did that, made those position choices instead, is because that they felt that they fell into that top category.
Can't argue with that. My thing is that I don't know that there is, and chat, help me out with this one. Is there a single player on the Detroit Lions roster that is so good it means that they can't draft another player at that position? Because I don't know that there is. So, like, you have Penei Sewell, but would anybody freak out if they drafted another offensive tackle to, say, take over for Sewell? Okay, so we got to vote for Sewell.
And I would say position, not necessarily his player.
Well, I mean,
I would lump tackle in that together, right and left. Like I would be disappointed if we would have taken a tackle over something else.
I can see him taking a tackle next year.
1 year closer to the end of Decker's contract. Yeah.
Right. So a slot wide receiver. Sure. Makes sense. So, like, the thing about, like, to use the Super Bowl champions as an example, Kansas City, is I think Kansas City has more roster holes to fill than the Detroit Lions do. The difference between Kansas City and the Detroit Lions is they have 2 elite players. They have Patrick Mahomes, who's the best quarterback in the game. End of sentence. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The dude is fucking crazy. And they have Chris Jones, who is probably the second best interior defender currently in the NFL. Those guys are elite at what they do. And, like, they are just riding those 2 players by trying to support them enough with everything else that's around them. Okay, the Lions are not in that same situation. They are in close to the
Goff
opposite.
Is easy top 20 quarterback, though. I mean, number 20. But yeah,
he is a serviceable starter. But, like, I would say the same thing about Andy Dalton, honestly. or Kirk Cousins is the top of that group for me.
I would
right?
take Kirk Cousins at overall either of those other two guys.
Yeah, I would too. So like my contention and what you and I were talking about leading up to the draft is go get Anthony Richardson.
God, that would have been so good.
Go get Anthony Richardson. Like, have the opportunity to get better at the thing that is the most important. Or if you don't do that, go ahead, fill multiple positions. Like Mosley, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson are not on the roster next year, right? So, 12 months from now, you will had to have addressed outside corner potentially. And you would assume that Brian Branch steps in for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. So, like, there you go. But, like, if we had started this season with Brock Wright, James Mitchell, other player to be named at tight end, I would not have batted an eye and been like, oh, we're so weak at tight end. Sorry. Like, some teams really utilize their tight end. That's great. Kansas City is one of them. Okay. But I don't know that an elite tight end is something that a team who is looking to go far in the playoffs must absolutely have to the exclusion of other positions. So I don't put it up there high. When you have a Travis Kelce, it makes life easier. I'm not arguing that.
Yeah. When you have one of the top 10 players at a position all time, you're going to be like, winning.
Right. It's great, but you can't go out there and say, until we get a Travis Kelce, this offense isn't going to go to where we need to be. Okay. You need to change offenses then.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would have too, Joey. They tricked me. So, positional value, a tool in the toolbox of all NFL rosters. How much you take advantage of it, I think, will help determine how much cap space you have available to you to build the rest of your roster. So there's no reason I think that you can't have a team actively pursue getting a top 5 to 10 quarterback and still effectively building their roster, especially if you hit on the quarterback. Which is why I expect this time next year, the Arizona Cardinals have drafted Caleb Williams, traded away Kyler Murray, and have effectively restarted their franchise. Because I think they're going to get the number 1 and number 2 picks in the draft, and you're gonna start all over. Because why would you?
And number 2?
They have Houston's first round pick, and those are the.
That's right.
They have Houston and Arizona have the worst odds, have the best odds to be the 2 worst teams in the NFL next year.
I mean, well, that's essentially what Houston did this year, right? Wasn't it Houston?
2 and 3. They had 2 and 3. They had 2 and they traded up to 3.
Yeah.
And that that's a huge problem.
That's a reset button right there.
My God, because Houston said that the number 3 overall pick in this year's draft is potentially more valuable than the number 1 pick in next year's draft. And that can almost never be true. So Arizona made off like bandits in this class. Bandits.
Yeah. Cleveland says, hold my beer.
Oh, yeah. They've been bad for a long time.
But I forgot that they traded up for that. And that will be pretty absurd.
You don't remember when I grabbed your arm during the draft because I was so excited? Yeah. Oh,
wait a minute. They're picking again?
What's happening?
How did this happen?
It says 3 in Houston. So, but so we're going to do some refreshers from time to time on some other things that we firmly believe in here. And positional value is the number 1 thing that I believe in when it comes to how to effectively build a roster, because it doesn't exclude any other philosophy.
Right.
If you do best player available, you exclude other philosophies. Right? Like if Kansas City had the number 1 pick in the draft and Caleb Williams is the best player in the draft and they're going to use best player available, they have to pick Caleb Williams.
Right.
That's stupid, and they would never do it. So you have to broaden the definition of best player available, that for our team, or whatever.
That meets our needs.
So then if you have if you're Kansas City and you have the number 1 overall pick and you take Marvin Harrison Jr., the dude looks amazing, right? Might be really great to pair Patrick Mahomes with that particular player.
Yeah.
But is he the best player in the draft? Maybe not. Maybe he's excellent, yet not the best. So, I mean, like, do you want to spend the number 1 overall pick on not the best player in the draft, Jacksonville Jaguars? So, like, I think that, like, if there are other philosophies on how to build your roster that are exclusionary, I don't believe positional value is one of them, because all it helps you do is set your board, and then you can do everything else after that.
Yeah.
The problem, I think, is that a lot of people see it to be exclusionary. Do this in place of all these other things.
Right.
Game tape, player, character,
yeah,
athleticism, whatever it might be. Does not have to be.
Right. Yeah, and it's like we kind of said right at the beginning, this isn't a thing where if you're a running back, a tight end, or a center, that you're not worthwhile, that you're not a good player, that you don't have a reason to be on the field, right? They're all positions that play every down. I guess running backs don't play every down. Sometimes they go 4 or 5 wide, but like centers do. But like you're going to be playing every down, and there's a reason for you to be on the field, just like an off-ball linebacker, right? But the impact that you make isn't as much as a quarterback. It's not going to be as much as a left tackle protecting said quarterback, right? So it's just, Joey, it's just easier to scream BPA into the abyss, right? Best player available. Like, what does that mean? Best player for you, right?
You and I have had this conversation a number of times. Like, if you scream best player available, who can argue with that?
Right.
Who can say, well, you're arguing against taking the best player available? Like, my boss and like I work at a bank, so one of our board of directors were in my office late last week, and I hadn't seen the guy that was on our board in a while. And he was like, "Hey, dude, didn't you love the Lions draft?" And I was like, "No." And he was like, "What?" And it was like, and so I went through my rationale, and like I could see both of them just going like this, like as I was talking, and I was
it sinking in, or were they just like, "Oh, he's crazy"?
Well, I mean, like, so that's the fun thing about the draft, right? Is that no matter who you take, you're getting better because no one's bad yet,
right?
So like, it's the ultimate hopeful sports experience is the draft of whatever sport you happen to like. And when you think about it, and like beyond that surface level BPA type of feeling, that's when you get to like some of these other like roster building techniques. And like positional value has always been there. It's just that people have finally looked at, okay, how are teams spending money? How are we valuing these players at certain positions? Yada, 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 yada. And now using that as a tool to try and help you find those little tiny margins that might be the difference between you adding a player that someone else, like a DeAndre Hopkins, like this time last year, the Lions cap was not in a position where they could have added a DeAndre Hopkins at this point in the season. Now they have done that. So their cap is getting better. Is that because of positional value? In part, not all of it, but like incorporate that thinking into how you make decisions on how to construct your roster. I think that you will get closer to what it means to be a successful team in the NFL and to remain successful. So
totally agree. Yeah, it's there's a reason why every team has a capologist, right? Their job is to look at the cap and figure out value and all that kind of stuff. And those capologists, they're in the same conversations with their GMs and coaches when they're talking about, should we acquire this player? Should we let this player go? What's the cap implications? All of that kind of stuff. And if you don't think that they are looking at what position does that player play in addition to what's his cap hit, you're foolish. That's absolutely something that they're looking at. It's part of their math.
I mean, like we got to remember, like when you and I talk about the cap,
Yeah.
we are talking about it as if it's monopoly money. But like to an owner,
Yeah.
that's real money walking out the door. And when it's like, you know, and I think Moneyball did a good example of this, like they're trying to do the trade, and like Brad Pitt really wants to make this trade for this relief pitcher. And he was like, okay, like tell the owner I'll pay for the difference out of my own pocket. But when I trade this dude next year for more money, I get to keep the money that I make. And so then then they go back to the owner, and they tell that to the owner, and the owner's like, okay, I'll get you your $250 or whatever.
Right.
Right. Because like $250,000 or $10 million or whatever the number is money that dude is writing a check for that he is giving away. And billionaires don't become billionaires by giving away money very often. So
true story. So, yeah, that's
we did.
I did not have anything else on positional value that's not going to just take another hour, because we could talk about this forever.
Yeah, I mean, there's some really interesting, like, quote unquote deep dives that you can do on the philosophy of positional value. If you guys are like diehard positional value warriors, go look up the mathematical paper, The Loser's Curse, put out by Thayer and what was the other guy's name? Mumford or something like that, like in 2011. It's the market study that led to the idea of positional value. So it's a super dry read because it's a straight up paper for an academic journal. But these mathematicians treated the NFL free agency like a marketplace, like you would see for commodities, and came up with these ideas about like, where's the best draft picks that you can have. It's 25 and 40, by the way. So like somewhere in that range. So like you wouldn't have expected that, you know, and then they explain their reasoning, and then you can get these little tidbits for like how you can build rosters. That's pretty cool.
There was also a book called The Draft Stage that you
I've
let
read
me
it.
borrow. I think I still have it.
Yeah.
You lent it to me. I still have it. But that again also talks about the accessibility problem and the value of drafting certain positions over others at certain portions of the draft. The draft stage was really good as well.
Yeah.
So, but
there are probably lots of books.
there are probably almost certainly lots of books.
Yeah,
so
100%.
Let's end it for now, and then we'll catch everybody next Tuesday, 7 p.m. as always Eastern, for anybody that's not in our time zone.
Yeah, if you guys have ideas for topics you want now that it's the off season, throw us an email. There is not a very realistic. Kevin, stop it, Joey. Bad Joey.
Draft
I want
day.
my picks back. No,
he's talking draft day.
Oh, that's such a terrible thing.
As always, like, comment, subscribe. It helps us find more people and have more people join the community. So that'll be awesome. Email questions, ideas, feedback, whatever, to casualgmpodcast@gmail.com. Or you can add us at casualgm1 on Twitter. That's all I got, yo. Anything else?
No, I'm all set.
All right. We will catch you guys next Tuesday. Have a fantastic... thanks, Joey. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Have a fantastic rest of your week.
Bye, guys.
Peace.